Geppetto has a 10-year-old son named Carlo. They have an unbreakable bond, spend a lot of time together. Geppetto tells Carlo stories, plays with him, teaches him life lessons. They both laugh and joke. Carlo even goes with him to work. There's a moment when Carlo even says he wants to carve toys like him. It seems Carlo is the son Geppetto always dreamed of. Carlo and Geppetto are very happy living together, but not forever. One day, Carlo goes with his father to paint a wooden Christ at the church. It gets a bit late and they hear the sound of airplanes. Geppetto gets worried and tells Carlo to gather everything and leave. As they were about to leave, the boy forgets a pine cone and returns to the church for it. Unfortunately, at that moment, a warplane drops a bomb on the church. What irony in a place made for peace. And it ends Carlo's life and Geppetto's soul, who lost everything that day. Geppetto takes the pine cone and buries it beside Carlo's grave, where it will grow into the tree Geppetto will use to create Pinocchio. In fact, the first and last shot of the film is a pine cone, as a symbol of life. When one life is lost, another must grow. Geppetto doesn't cope well with his son's death. After burying him, Geppetto falls into a deep depression. He barely works now and spends his days drinking beside Carlo's grave. Years went by and the world carried on with its life. But Geppetto didn't. After about 20 years, Sebastian, the cricket, arrives who, while searching for a place to write his memoirs, settles in the tree that grew beside Carlo's grave. One night, the cricket sees Geppetto completely drunk, blaming God for ignoring his prayers and not bringing back his son. Then Geppetto grabs an axe and decides to cut down the tree, with the cricket still inside, saying he'll rebuild his son, but made out of wood. He takes the pine tree home and spends the whole night building Pinocchio until he can't go on anymore and falls asleep on the floor. Moments later, a fairy appears who looks after small, forgotten, and lost things, intending to give life to the wooden boy to comfort the poor old man. However, Sebastian wasn't ready to give up his house to the guardian. Faced with the cricket's resistance, she offers him a deal. If he promises to protect and guide Pinocchio down a good path, she will grant him one wish. Sebastian accepts the deal, thinking he could use that wish to become a famous writer. That's how the cricket becomes Pinocchio's conscience. And I don't think it's a coincidence he's an insect, because insects are annoying, just like our conscience, which urges us to act on what bothers us to make us better. And that's exactly what happens in Pinocchio. The next day, Geppetto is horrified to see his wooden creation is alive. He's not thrilled either when the boy interrupts mass and reveals himself to everyone. The villagers see Pinocchio as a demon, a monster, as someone different and therefore inferior. We also see Geppetto struggling a lot to accept Pinocchio, since he keeps comparing him to Carlo. Faced with this, Pinocchio asks his father while staring at the wooden Christ in the church. Everybody loves him. They were all singing to him, and he's made of wood like me. Why do they love him and not me? And the thing is, dear Pinocchio, unfortunately, there are people who are afraid of the things they don't understand, the things that don't look like them, when really, just like you said, we are all made of the same stuff. We are all human. Now, continuing with the story, many things have changed in the village since Carlo's death. Benito Mussolini's fascist regime has taken control, and things aren't as good as they once were. So when people meet Pinocchio, they all want to exploit him for their own benefit. One of these characters is Count Volpe. Volpe means fox, and this character is definitely a predator, as he wants to use Pinocchio to bring glory back to his puppet and circus show. Pinocchio, feeling rejected by everyone else and looking for approval and recognition, agrees to perform in the show. When Geppetto finds out about this, he decides to go after him, but when he tries to rescue him, Pinocchio gets hit by a car. This is the first of many deaths for Pinocchio, since given that he's not a real boy, he cannot truly die. While he's in limbo, another fairy tells him that the only thing that gives human life value and meaning is that it's short and finite. And she's right. We only value the things that we can lose. We value our own life and the people we love because we know they won't last forever. So, Pinocchio is doomed to resurrect again and again for all eternity. He comes back to life, and those who witness Pinocchio's return are deeply shocked, including Podesta, one of the fascist government officers. This general thinks Pinocchio would make a great soldier, since he cannot die, so he tries to recruit him for a military project. But Geppetto gets upset. The old man takes Pinocchio, and on their way back home, they both get into an argument. Geppetto vents and tells Pinocchio he's always been a burden to him, and that he's nothing like his son Carlo. Pinocchio, tired of these comparisons, says, "I'm not Carlo and I don't want to be like Carlo." Here the film gives us another important message about imperfect parents and imperfect children. Our parents aren't all-knowing or able to handle everything. They're imperfect. They make mistakes, and although we wish it weren't true, sometimes they have no idea how to deal with life. Sometimes they feel defeated, and like anyone else, they might say things they feel in the moment, but with time they realise that it wasn't truly how they felt. And on the other hand, we children are also imperfect. We don't come to take someone else's place, but to take our own. We're not perfect either, and we're not here to be what others want us to be, but to be our true selves. After the argument, in the middle of the night, Pinocchio leaves his house and joins the circus again. He thinks this way he'll stop being a burden to his dad. He thinks as a puppet, he could earn money and also avoid the war. However, Pinocchio is still an innocent young boy and doesn't know that the Count is just using him and truly sends no money at all to his dad. Meanwhile, Geppetto, after a big speech by Sebastian the Cricket, in which he urges him to act like a real father and to love his son just as he is, decides to go search for Pinocchio. But during his journey, he's swallowed by a giant whale. Meanwhile, Pinocchio finds that life in the circus was not what he thought. The Count exploits and mistreats both Pinocchio and Spazzatura, a monkey who works the puppets in the shows. Spazzatura means trash in Italian. So, fed up with this life and the abuse, Pinocchio plans to ruin the big show they were going to perform for Mussolini himself. And that's what he did. When performing before the dictator, he mocked him right to his face, which led Mussolini to kill him. Pinocchio returns to life, but this time under the custody of Podesta, who now trains him to become a soldier. There, Pinocchio becomes friends with Candlewick, who is the son of Podesta. Candlewick feels that his dad doesn't love him, and he's spent his whole life trying to earn his approval. He even says, "I'll prove to him I'm not a coward. I'll make him love me." And this is interesting because the first time Candlewick sees Pinocchio in church, he says, "If he's a puppet, why are there no strings?" And the great irony is that the real puppet was him. Candlewick's strings were pulled by his father, as he always tried hard to please him, being someone he truly wasn't. Then, while they're at the camp, during a war game, Pinocchio and Candlewick face off in the end, but it ends in a tie. Podesta gets angry and tells his son to shoot Pinocchio, but Candlewick refuses. He's doing the right thing, and even if he doesn't know it, standing up to his father shows how brave he really is. Suddenly the camp is attacked, and an explosion sends Pinocchio back to the Count. The Count ties him up on a cross, and now Spazzatura gets his chance to rebel against his master, pushing him off the cliff. And this gives us a great lesson. We're all influenced by strings we cannot see. But although these things influence us, what Pinocchio, Candlewick and Spazzatura teach us is to resist being defined by them. These characters invite us to take responsibility for our being and to reject a life shaped by others' expectations. They teach us to question ourselves and find out who or what is pulling our strings and decide if that's the path we truly want to follow. Pinocchio and Spaz survive the fall, but only to be swallowed by the same whale as Geppetto. Geppetto and Pinocchio reunite and are overjoyed, but they still face the problem of escaping the beast's belly. Pinocchio's ability to grow his nose each time he lies turns out useful, and they use it to escape through the whale's blowhole. However, Pinocchio is pulled in again, but this time with a mine, allowing Pinocchio to sacrifice himself to destroy the whale and save his father. The explosion is so strong that Geppetto passes out and drifts in the sea. Pinocchio can't do anything, since he dies and upon dying must wait a while before reviving. But there is a solution. If Pinocchio breaks the hourglass, he will come back right away, but he'll return as a mortal. That means if he dies again, he will never resurrect again. Pinocchio decides to break the hourglass and returns to save Geppetto, but dies in the process. This reminds me of Viktor Frankl, who said suffering stops being suffering at the moment it finds meaning, and in many cases, that meaning may be sacrifice. To save his father, he sacrificed himself, and his life had meaning. It's here when Geppetto calls Pinocchio his son for the first time, and instead of wanting him to be the son he lost, he loves Pinocchio for who he is. He tells him, "Don't be Carlo, don't be anyone else, be exactly who you are." Now remember how if the cricket managed to guide Pinocchio down a good path, he'd be granted a wish. Well, Sebastian the Cricket selflessly decides to use his wish to bring Pinocchio back to life. At last, Geppetto, Pinocchio, the Cricket and Spaz live the rest of their lives happily. The film ends with a pine cone falling, highlighting the cycle of life and death. Or, as the film says it, what must happen, happens, and then we no longer exist. And with that I want to end. Pinocchio urges us to live an authentic life. Death must happen, and it will. So may the fact that one day we'll cease to exist push us to take responsibility for our being and our life and not let ourselves be controlled by outside strings.